back in 2017, it was the one small pollster that got the results right. And as you may remember, the Supreme Court, when it invalidated the election on August 8th of 2017, the grounds for invalidation were all about processes, procedures, returns, things of that nature. However, the court did not, the court did not deal with numbers. And in 2017, Center for African Progress managed to identify the winner, Uhuru and Ruto, achieving 53% of the vote, which seems to be the recognized number. And then, of course, Raila and Kalonzo received 42%. Okay, so they got it right. The point is they've gotten it right. The one important aspect of this particular poll is that it's not sponsored by anyone. That is, it comes out of the revenue, the capital, the income of Center for African Progress, because Center for African Progress also does market research studies, surveys of that type, which are for profit. And out of the profits, a decision was made to commission this particular poll. So it is an independent poll, very different from some of the other better known ones, I think, or more widely circulated polls. And that's why I'm very pleased that you made an effort to get here, to see how the results that you'll be seeing in this proposal are in fact tracking with other companies. And then you can make a decision, at least to see where the trends are. Because I think, having been around Kenya for quite some time, I am also very much aware of how numbers get skewed. And I think it's important to have as much independent information as possible. What I'm going to try to do is hit some of the highlights. And if what I'm saying doesn't make any sense to you, raise your hand and stop me. Oh. Here we go. As I said, we're just going to scroll through that, and you'll be able to catch up on it, I think. Is that all right with you, sir? Thank you. Okay. What I gathered, what I got from this poll, this independent poll, was the fact that registered voters are going to turn out. They will turn out for this poll. Somewhere in excess of 90% of registered voters have said, I'm going to show up. Now, those of you who were old enough to be watching television in 2017, on August 8th, 2017, those of you who might have seen me on KTN during the elections, I did point out that Kenyans historically come out to vote. And you know, I think that's a very important aspect of the elections in Kenya, because there is a certain amount of legitimacy in two elections in this country. People do come out to vote. And the thing about this election as well will be the turnout. What you'll see when you go through the proposal and you look at the different regions, and we all know that people are expected to vote on a ethnic, tribal, whatever you want to say. I can say these things, because look at me. That very often there's a lot of ethnic arithmetic going on, a lot of ethnic mathematics. We all know that in a place like Nairobi, which is also featured in the report, it's a very cosmopolitan city. And I think there are indications in this poll, if you will, that point to an interesting outcome in the aftermath of the election on August 9th, particularly in places like Nairobi. Now, some of the more, I have been known as a security analyst, a security advisor. I've been on television a long time, talking about terrorist attacks, things of that nature, dating back, and also finance and governance, dating back to 2008, 2010. What I think that the media needs to focus on, and some of the information in this report, has to do with expectations of violence. Expectations of violence. About 75% of the respondents said, yes, there will be violence once the results of the presidential poll are released. That's a lot of people. And that kind of expectation of violence is not being, and these are editorial remarks, by the way, because I find that poll results are exceptionally important for interpretation and giving you a groundwork for further investigation. That's just me. Thing is, 75% of the respondents are expecting violence in the aftermath of the announcement of the poll. Now, the positive aspect is that the same number, more or less, trust the security forces to be able to control the violence. In other words, there is no, I don't see any expectation that things will spiral out of control. In other words, the bugaboo of 2007, 2008 remains that way. Remains that way. Now, there's a section on institutional, how do people see institutions? In other words, how do people view the IEBC? Again, editorial. We've been seeing a lot of doubt expressed about the capability or the credibility of what the IEBC is doing. And I don't know whether that's a media problem. That is, the media focuses on certain things, seems to blow them out of proportion, and then unfortunately the IEBC does not clarify the issue very quickly. Does not, and so there's a lot of gray areas going on. So the IEBC, the confidence in the IEBC, not so much. Not as much as you would hope, given all the money, given the fact that it's the same team, well, it is the same team, more or less, that was there in 2017. Same boss. A good thing, however, is confidence in an institution, and this is the Supreme Court. There is the majority of people believe, over the majority, believe that the Supreme Court will be able to handle any dispute about the presidential election. That was not the case in 2017. It was a first time. I'll remind you that it was one of the first times anyway in Africa where a presidential poll was nullified by the Supreme Court. And whether it received favorable response from everybody in that election is irrelevant, because 5 years on, voters believe that the Supreme Court will be able to deal with a presidential poll dispute. In other words, why go in the streets if you've got an institution that will represent you, no matter what your political opinion is? Some of the other results in this poll, which is very comprehensive, I think we'll have to scroll back a little bit now, because when people were asked about what are their major concerns, not what are their major concerns, but what do they want their elected representatives, their politicians, to deal with once they get into office, is something that we all know, is cost of living. Now, this is global. Kenyans have concerns about cost of living increase, out of control, and that's seen in a lot of other places in the world. But here it does, having lived in this country for decades, I have to be honest, that with the level of unemployment and underemployment coming out of the COVID-19 crisis is exceptionally worrying. And it does in fact, people want something to be done. People expect violence because they look around and say, look, everybody's poor. Fortunately, we all see the security forces as being able to control it. So there's a high cost of living, lack of unemployment. Corruption is not a big ticket item. Corruption is not the big ticket item that many of the civil society organizations, foreigners and the like, might consider it to be. I'll leave that, when you get your copies, I'll leave that up to you to take it back to your houses, your media houses, and knock around the idea. Why is corruption not as big an issue as cost of living? Well, cost of living hits us in the pocketbook every day. Corruption is a longer term problem. The thing that I find important is that, and that is not in this poll, because the poll gives you data and statistics. It's up to you to look at it, up to your talking heads on your stations to drill down and decide what does that mean. Given the fact that well over 90% of registered voters are going to vote, and given the fact that the cost of living, pocketbook issues are a major concern to men and women, both genders of voters, there will be this high turnout. In other words, although the registration, the new voter registration flopped this year, but they flopped mainly among so-called youth. I see the so-called youth sitting here. The fact is that in most countries in the world, by the way, youth do not vote. In fact, where I came from originally, it's old people like me come out and vote. But in this case, you'll see the statistics demonstrate that within the survey, you'll see a preponderance of people who are in fact, for voting purposes, over 45. Not as many 18 to 24-year-olds who are not registered, by the way. And if you weren't registered notionally, you shouldn't even be in this poll. So this is not just some sort of everybody gets to answer. It was Kenyan citizens, registered voters. Here we have again, Supreme Court, yes. So that's always a very positive thing. And in fact, on August 8th, 2017, when I was on a panel, I did say everyone came out to vote, including in the rain. So, and that is a positive thing. And I think it also belies the rumor that the last 5 years, mainly because of corruption, has caused people to turn off. You know, the common thread of discussion is all about disillusionment, disenchantment among the electorate, because mainly SUVs, the kind of expenditures and waste and corruption that we read about. Meanwhile, people are coming out to vote because they want to have something done about cost of living. There are not very many regional differences. Cost of living hits everybody. Another point that I found interesting and a bit worrying was that everyone knows there's a presidential election coming up. That's very clear in the figures. Okay. We've never choreographed this, so I take full responsibility for everything jumping around. Okay. Everybody knows there's a presidential election coming up. What's fascinating to me as a longtime observer and resident of Kenya is also how relatively people don't seem to have paid much attention to MCAs. And then on top, and then somewhere in between, you have the members of parliament.
At the center because of the campaign, the microphone.
Okay. So what that also means, I hope you can all hear me, is that people will vote for the president, and then you'll see this party affiliation numbers. But you'll see, as we know, Azimio is a coalition of many parties, much more so than KK or UDA. There's a very high number of people who are actually identifying as UDA now, whereas you still find people saying, I'm Wiper, I'm this and I'm that. Now, I think that leads us to a conclusion that you'll find within this very extensive poll, which is independent, will lead to people jumping around on the ballot. In other words, unless you've seen I think this is where, interestingly, the number of the amount of advertising that goes up, the number of placards, the number of pictures, if you will, of people who are running for office, so that when you walk through Lavington, you can see whoever's running. That people, when they get to vote, they'll hit the president's side, they'll vote there, and then they'll start making their way down the ballot. I don't believe there'll be very many six-piece suits that I understand Mr. Odinga is expecting or asking for. There'll be a lot more independents and a lot more representatives or members of smaller political parties who will be in the next government. Now that is, since most of the parties here do not seem ideological, that's not a bad thing. But it will tell you if people are voting for local, voting on the basis of local personalities, local politicians, that whoever's on top may have to make some compromises and shuffle things around. Now, Something I would expect the media to look at is the total number of registered voters, based on what the IABC has said, and how many are going to actually vote. Historically, 70% of the registered voters come out to vote, historically. And this goes back as well to the constitutional referendum of August 4th, 2010, where 60% of the registered voters came out to vote, and 90% voted in favor of the new Constitution. Okay. I think if we can go to the regional area that shows security. Well, yes, you see, where everyone's concerned about cost of living, not so much corruption. Then there's a category which is extremely important about security and crime. Security and crime. As you might expect, or maybe not, although people in the northeast of Kenya, we'll see the projections. We know that. Now, this is about people's concerns about crime tend to be in those areas of northeast Kenya and lower east, mainly because of Al-Shabaab. And then you have in some of the counties in the Rift Valley, upper Rift Valley, where we know there have been armed pastoralists, cattle rustling and the like. Those people are also somewhat concerned about crime. I only mention that because it's my specialty, so I have to blow a horn for me. But on top of which, from the point of view of who's voting for who and what the candidates are speaking about, you don't hear much talk from any of the candidates about how they're going to deal with crime. And I think that may be addressed in the next 10 days, perhaps. Now, one of the things that and I'm sorry, my time is somewhat limited. It shouldn't be, but it is. When you look at the bottom line, okay, I think you're all sitting here and saying, well, what does that say about who's going to come out on top? Based, not a best guess, but based on a track record dating back to 2017. You'll see in this poll the assertion based on randomized surveys that Raila will come out on top, getting a roughly 52% of the popular vote. And then Mr. Ruto they're looking at a 45% result. Because that's what we're here for, right? Well, who's going to win? Well, we'll see on August 10th, I guess, if the if the returns transmission system works. We'll see something. And but I think that's an interesting result. I don't think it's off the mark. I would ask you all to look at certain places in the country where UDA is going to do extremely well, or you look at the so-called what I say the so-called mountain. In the so-called mountain, UDA is actually looking at doing very well. The question then is, of course, then the question becomes is, what will turnout be? Will there be a very high turnout in this area? And then again, what you don't see you can't see in a poll, by the way, is people's perceptions of candidates. That is, we know the perceptions dating back to 2007, 2008. We know this. We also know that Martha Karua was brought in to sway the mountain. However, this actually shows some results that are not entirely what you might have expected. Again, though, it's all about turnout. Will the people in this area turn out at 95%? Are they also saying, we're going to vote definitely? And if they do, well, there's a lot of people up there. Something I don't think it's easy to do now is to come up with any sort of projections as to counties. You have to come ahead in a certain number of counties. The Constitution's kind of clear on that. That I don't think it's possible at this time to figure that out. Oh. Okay, I'll try. I've been asked to summarize. The summarization is the bottom. Okay. The summary is it's actually kind of easy now, I think. I talked myself into a hole. The poll, the survey indicates that Raila Odinga is going to be elected with 52%. His opponent, Deputy President Ruto, should come up at 45% on a national average. Again, people are going to vote. Kenyans always come out and vote. An overwhelming, well over 90% of registered voters will be voting, okay? There is no difference in gender. Men and women will all come out and vote on election day. There's a high level of confidence in the Supreme Court. I got that right. And so if there are any problems with the presidential polls, there's a high level of confidence in the Supreme Court, which actually, if you think about it, if you get out of your little ideological hole, makes sense. People are not going to go out and kill each other. The Center for African Progress, and I'm a supporter, an associate, if you will, a friend. Center for African Progress does a lot of polling by any of the political parties, not sponsored by anyone, and it was done out of retained earnings. And so therefore it's viewed as a corporate social response being done to further somebody's agenda. Again, it's independent and it's smaller. I'll remind you that, in fact, CAP. Geraldine, was that a sufficient summary?
Yes.
Okay.